Living in China is cheap, but is that true? Welcome to Soul Quest. Today we're going to talk about the true cost of living in China and how to avoid being a wage cook in another country. So a lot of people talk about how cheap it is in China. Yeah, that's true. I got to give it to them. But to live in China, that's a whole different type of behemoth. Now, you have to consider pre-China when you enter China and after you come to China. Now, what is pre-China? Usually before you start living in China, not to visit China, to live in China, you do have to do a lot of documentation. And this documentation could be quite pricey because it does, well, most of the time it does come out from your own pocket first and then the company will reimburse it later. Now, a lot of people don't really consider this because it's not that exciting. These are some pre-China costs you do need to consider. First of all, the cost of living, food, and also entertainment. Those three are the core basic in order for you to stay sane. And another part is your documentation. Yes, a lot of company would often give you a reimbursement for this, but it does come out from your own pocket first and they'll be reimbursed later on your very first paycheck or when you first arrive in China. Third one will be inside your luggage because there are things in China that'll be really hard for you to find out here. For examples, your shoes and your medication. But depending on your needs, this might cost you a lot of money. As for me, I think pre-China, that was like around a length of 1 month, I spent about 700 buckaroonies. And that was like me really living frugally for that whole month. And the next topic that'll devour your expenses will be when you enter China. This period will be around like 1 to 3 weeks. And this is the time where you get settled in and meet with your ambassador. And their job is to get you used to living in China. But sometimes they never really told you how much it truly costs until you really get in here. Now, these are all the things that you do need to consider when you start moving out here in China. The first thing that you do need to pay is your apartment deposit fee. When you rent an apartment out here in China, is as it is as around the world. You have to put in deposit, but a lot of people don't really think too much about it. Now, the deposit are usually about like 2 months deposit, but not only that 2 months deposit, you do have to pay for an agent fee as well. So all the listing of the prices is right over here, but the gist of it, you do have to pay all this stuff in the span of 1 to 3 weeks, even less than that, maybe 2 weeks. The main reason why is because the company would give you a hotel and you're able to stay in that hotel for approximately 2 weeks. Yes, you can extend it for another week, but you do have to consult that with the company. But if the company is a bit salty or either stingy, then that might be a no-go. So I would say about 1 to 2.5 weeks or so. But that is not all, but you do have to consider about the other utilities that comes in with the apartment. A lot of apartments out here in China are modern and nice when livable when you start renting it because it is mandatory for a lot of tenants to fully clean the apartment before leaving the apartment. But there are some apartment out there that's a bit janky and it does take a lot of time and money for you to fix and clean it as well. You can hire a cleaner, but it will increase your expenses. But the gist of it, you have to pay approximately about 10K up to 13K. And of course, a honeymoon phase. You're gonna love every part of it. You're gonna be curious about everything. And you're gonna fall into a lot of tourist trap as well. I mean, from my experience, I spent so much money on dumb stuff on my very first week. And I spent about like 1,000 RMB on just some dumb thing that I never even used. And I think one of the biggest money sucker out there is food from the mall, which is not a good idea for someone who just barely moved into China. Because food in malls, especially like the main malls, are very, very pricey. And I didn't really know about that before I started living here. Now, a typical apartment costs about 3,000 up to 4,000 renminbi. I would say you can go down bad all the way to 2,700, but lower than that, you're gonna get a really, really tiny, small apartment. And based off my experience and any other expat that I talk to, they really can't handle that. I don't think it's part of the whole Western culture. We like wide spaces, a big living room, separated room, you know, not like a studio cramped room, something like that. Unless if you're from New York. But if you don't have the money, what should you do? I would recommend that you go to the company and get their free apartment. A lot of company would offer free apartment. That means you don't have to pay for deposit. Just go to the company and live in that company's apartment. Now, another option would be just live there and then after that, gain some money and then find your own apartment after. Now, if you don't really want to wait, the company's apartment is just down bad, stupid, or dirty, then I would recommend that you borrow money from the company. A lot of companies often offer like a loan payment system. Basically, they would offer out 10K up to 20K loans. But that's 20K is kind of rare nowadays, especially with a lot of people that's just gonna run away with the money. Typically, they would just cut it off from your paycheck. And if you want to cut off more, then you're able to do that. And sadly, unfortunately, that's what I did on my very first year because I didn't really know the initial cost when living out here. There wasn't a lot of information back then. Now on to the very last subject, and that is the upkeep of your life. Basically, this is the monthly expense on living in China. Basically, it costs about like 5,000 to 6,000 RMB per month. It's not that expensive at all. I would say it's god dang cheap. But like I mentioned earlier, the initial cost and pre-cost could be quite pricey, so you do have to consider that. And this cost also includes the apartment, as we can see in the list over here. Hey there, it's a long quest for the future, but I forgot to record the outro for this. But in general, I think living in China is cheap, but to get started, it does take quite a bit of money. If we learn anything today, is that you must at least bring some backup money before coming to China. Again, I appreciate you guys for subscribing to this channel. I didn't expect to get 20 subs so quickly, but I hope new expats get to see this video. That way they don't make the same mistake as I did, because I borrowed money from the company when I just arrived in China, and it wasn't a fun time at all. But overall, you do have to keep in mind for the pre-China phase and when you arrive in China. And that's about it. Soul Quest logging out. Peace.